Steve Borthwick has named his 33-man squad for this year's Rugby World Cup. My name's Mark, let's talk rugby. Okay, so we're going to first of all go through the squad that has been announced by Steve Borthwick. Then we will talk about who's been left out of the squad, any significant, people who are missing, and then talk about the players who are actually in the squad and what that maybe means about how England are going to approach the World Cup. So first of all, forwards, we got Ollie Chesham, Dan Cole, Tom Curry, Theo Dan, Ben Earl, Ellis Genge is a vice captain, and then we have Jamie George, Maro Itoje, Courtney Laurels, another vice captain, Lewis Ludlam, Joe Marler, George Martin, David Ribbons, Bevan Rodd, Kyle Sinclair, Will Stewart, Billy Vunipola, Jack Borker, and Jack Willis. In the backs then we got Henry Arundel, Danny Kerr, Ayla Daly, Owen Farrell, George Ford, Ollie Lawrence, Max Malins, Joe Marchant, Marcus Smith, Freddie Stewart, Manu Tuilagi, Jack Van Portfleet, Anthony Watson, and Ben Youngs. Okay, so players who've been left out, kind of significant players. First of all, we got Henry Slade. So Henry Slade played like 276 minutes or something in the Six Nations this year. So he's very lucky, I think, to have missed out on selection. I think there's a reason for that, when we look at the centres that were picked and the fact that only 3 specialist centres were picked as well. So obviously he was the one to miss out in the end. I could definitely see reasons for picking him, because if England want to play a certain way, I think, with, let's say, Marcus Smith running the show, Slade gives you more options in the midfield in terms of, actually running a space rather than running, trying to run through people, as it were. But I think England are maybe going for that kind of hard burst type game, and maybe he just doesn't fit that for Borthwick. We've also got Alex Dombrandt, who hasn't made it. So Dombrandt was, I think last year, really, the last couple of years at least, was kind of the new guy on the block that everybody wanted to see, that, Billy Vunipola was done and Dombrandt was going to be the guy now from here on. He played like 330 minutes in the Six Nations as well, so he got a lot of game time there, but there's something about Billy Vunipola in an England shirt that just England coaches want to see him there. And I think, again, Dombrandt is missing out because of that. He's kind of a similar player, but, maybe in the Six Nations didn't really give them as much go forward as they expected. And I think that's probably why he isn't there. Then we've also got, there was a couple of players who made their debut at the weekend who were trying to impress. So you had Pearson, who, I think, wasn't it Jack Morgan just absolutely destroyed him in a tackle, and then it was and people were talking about it being, the tackle on Tate from a few years ago, and just that, there was no way he was going to live up after that. I think he was just wrong place, wrong time kind of thing, that the game didn't go their way overall, but really for him. And also Jamie Blamire, who was playing in that one as well, I don't think he did himself any favours, and he got left out with the hookers. And then Joe Cockney-Singha played in that game as well. And I think with him, he's the kind of player that he's, I think, kind of a luxury to have in a squad. Defensively, he's not that great. He can, produce a moment of magic, but then you've got to weigh that up with, if he's not showing that form, which he didn't against Wales, then is he worth bringing to the Rugby World Cup? And obviously Borthwick decided that he wasn't. Then we also have, who is it that is left out? Ben Curry is out as well. Ben Curry got a decent amount of minutes in the Six Nations, but again, misses out. We got MacLeod, who was, left out initially anyway due to his back injury, but, no no chance of him coming back for the Rugby World Cup either. But then if we look at the players who are actually in there, so, we kind of go down through the squad as per the way it's laid out on the England's the RFU site, so the way they kind of split out. So start with the props. We got Joe Marler, Bevan Rodd, Kyle Sinclair, Will Stewart, Ellis Genge, and Dan Cole. So for me, I think, Marler, I think he's a good player to actually have. I don't like his sense of humor, but I think he's a good player in that kind of environment to have around the squad, just to kind of lighten the mood and to not, have everything being tense and everybody being too nervous about things. So I think that's good. There may be, depending on how England go, there may be some kind of, something that happens that will, if England do badly, will get blown out of proportion. Maybe something that he's done at the World Cup, similar to the way, Tulagi jumped off a ferry or wherever in New Zealand that time. So, that kind of thing might actually happen with him. But I think, around the squad, I think for a rugby squad, maybe, a decent pick. And I think on form as well, a decent pick there too. Bevan Rodd there, then, got the nod maybe ahead of, some, more experienced players who were left out, but still, I think Borthwick has shown that he was in his plans. Kyle Sinclair, I think, was a no-brainer. He's a really good prop. I think props go through this thing of being considered to be one of the best in the world, and then suddenly something gets pointed out to a referee or some coach shows something to someone, and then they start giving away penalties, and then people start thinking, he's not that good. So I think maybe you might actually see that with Andrew Porter. A little bit happened to him in the Six Nations. Hopefully they can fix that for the World Cup though for Ireland. But Sinclair, I think, is a very solid prop, and good work around the pitch as well. Then we have Will Stewart, a decent choice as well for the squad. You got Ellis Genge there, who, should be a starter in the World Cup, also vice captain there too. I think he's kind of matured a little bit now that they kind of had him captain, I think, for a game. They made him vice captain, and now he's kind of maturing a little bit into the role. Still has a little bit of that kind of mouthiness about him, but some people like that in their players, to get under the opposition's skin, especially if things are going well in the scrum for them. That kind of thing, it can work for you and work against you as well. When you're not going that well, a player mounting off like that can get on the bad side of the referee as well. And then you got Dan Cole, who, again, another solid pick there in the front row. So, they can put a decent front row on the pitch, and the backup front row isn't that bad either. But I don't think they're not going to be a front row who are going to be destroying the opposition regularly. There obviously will be teams that they can do it to, but we've seen them before. They're all kind of solid. On to the hookers then. So we've got Jamie George, who, I think everybody kind of knew who's going to the World Cup anyway. You got Theo Dan there, and then you have Jack Walker. So you've really only got George, who has that much experience, and then Dan and Walker I'm pretty sure it's the first World Cup for both of them. So you'd expect George to be the starter and one of the other two to be backing up. It's always interesting with selection like this. What happens if George is out, with the other two? Then, are they going to be able to step up? And especially the guy who has been left on the bench, when he comes on, is he going to get his darts right? And, he's going to contribute positively. But I think, as kind of the front row picks, the 9 of them there, they're decent, but again, some really good players in there, and some players who are maybe at test level and maybe a little bit unproven in terms of the top table. On to locks then, you got Maro Toji, always going to go. Don't think he's kind of hit the heights that he had previously, but he's one of those players that like his ceiling was so high that him, being a little bit down on that is still better than most of the locks that England have available anyway. Ollie Chesma thought had a decent Six Nations, and he seems to have come out of that pretty well. You got Dave Ribbons there as well, pretty solid, and George Burton there too. So for me, looking at the players who are going, probably the best locking combination, probably at the moment maybe Itoje and Chesham, but I'd maybe go for Itoje and Laws in the second row. But it looks like that Laws is going actually as a genuine back row, which is fair enough because that's where he's playing at the moment anyway. Onto the back rows themselves, then you got Ben Earl, Tom Curry, you got Courtney Laws, Jack Willis, Lewis Ludlam, and Billy Vunipola. So Tom Curry has shown that he some decent minutes in an England shirt, and in poor England performances as well. He actually stood out. I think that's important. Shows that he can step up there. Ben Earl, he's the kind of player that he could absolutely tear things up, or he could just be anonymous in the game as well. So England are obviously going to hope that he brings that kind of form with him. Courtney Lysa thinks he's one of those solid players who never really gives a poor performance, and I think that's why he's one of the vice captains. We might see him starting at 6, and maybe even switching into the second row from 6, and somebody else coming on, and then maybe going off for a lock replacement at some stage. So I think his versatility is very good, and the fact that he doesn't have that many bad games as well, I think is good. Jack Willis, really showed what he could do. Not playing in England either and being able to get into the squad just shows that he does the talent to do it. But again, really has to kind of step up against a top test side to show that he can do that. Lewis Ludlam, kind of similar as well. I can see a lot of these players, depending on how games go, being touted as being world class, and then things are going well, to being like they should never play for England again. I think a lot of these players are kind of in that kind of middle category, that when they have a good game, people think they are just amazing, and when they have a slightly less good game, people are talking about, there's so many better players that should be playing ahead of them. So but there's a chance for a lot of those players to show that they actually can do it at a Rugby World Cup. Not many players get that chance, and you really have to take it with both hands. Billy Vunipola has showed he's done it before. I think he's there basically ahead of Don Brandt, because Borthwick feels like England can rediscover that kind of game plan of before, that Vunipola just running hard and opposition having difficulty dealing with him. I think a lot of opposition that know how to deal with him will probably go in with maybe 2 players, one chopping low and then one getting in over the ball would be what I expect. Like if you're going high on someone like Billy Vunipola, very few players are actually going to be able to stop him that way. So, depending on how the opposition deal with him, either he's going to be barnstorming best as before, or he's going to be a player who maybe the opposition look to target to try and turn over the ball or win penalties as well. Onto then the back. So we got scrum halves. We got Jack Van Porfley. He was the starting scrum half throughout most of the Six Nations. I think he's going to be the starter in the World Cup as well. You got Danny Kerr there, tons of experience, and really showing that he can. He's another one of those players. I think he never has he doesn't have that many too many terrible games. He does though now and again make silly decisions though in the game that can affect his team. And then you have Ben Youngs there as well. So you got plenty with Youngs and Kerr, plenty of experience, and Van Porfley has had a lot of time in the jersey as well over the Six Nations. So I think solid in scrum half position. I wouldn't say any of these guys are really going to light up the World Cup. Van Porfley, I think needs to quicken up his pass from the base of rucks as well, because certain teams who go hunting the nine, the likes of South Africa, if they do play them, will kind of target him, I think. So he from the Six Nations, he got in trouble, a few times for it just being a little bit slow. So maybe we'll see the others coming in to try and kind of pick that pace up. Onto the fly halves, then you got Owen Farrell, George Ford, and Marcus Smith, like all really talented players. I know Owen Farrell gets a lot of stick from a lot of people, but he is a talented player, and people are basically blaming him for either Ford or Smith not being picked in 10, rather than picking on him for being a poor player per se. So, on Farrell, you know what you're going to get from him. Generally solid kicking. He did kind of lose his way for a little bit, but I think he'll probably in the World Cup be back to his best. George Ford is probably out of the fly halves to have, probably the best actually running a backline, I think, overall. But I'm not sure how much game time he's actually going to see against at least the big guns that England are going to come against. Marcus Smith, he's got bags of talent, great runner of the ball. He's got a great pass too, but kicking game, I think, needs to improve. Game management overall needs to improve as well. We probably will see at some stage, I think, Marcus Smith at 10 and Owen Farrell at 12. Maybe for a couple of games in the thing. And I think that's why when we look at the centres, that we've only actually got 3 specialist centres. I think that Farrell is going as a fly half / centre rather than just a specialist fly half. So in the sense, we've got Manu Tuilagi, got Joe Merchant and Ollie Lawrence. So, I think Tuilagi, if he's fit, he's going to be picked at 13, because I think, again, that it's a lot of England's game plan is that, that double running threat, direct running of himself and Billy Vunipola to make it awkward for defences to be able to defend them. But then they have to be a bit more subtle about it. Use them a lot as dummy runners, or use them as carriers who actually pass out the back before contact rather than taking the contact, because the likes of Manu Tuilagi, like hard running centres, they like to take that contact with ball in hand and then maybe try to offload, get their hands free. But if you can actually pass before the contact, and then somebody coming on a loop maybe can go through a gap, that may not be there after contact. But that's the kind of game plan I think that they're looking for, is a lot of hard straight running and then try and create space elsewhere for other players. But then you got Joey Merchant and Ollie Lawrence, who can give them, different options at centre. I'd love to see Lawrence and Merchant getting a run out as a centre combination as well. I think they would offer something completely different to what we maybe, what it looks like Borthwick's plan is, at least. On to then the back three. So we've got Elliot Daly, Max Malins, Henry Arundel, Freddie Stewart, and Anthony Watson. So I think out of those, Freddie Stewart is the one who's absolutely nailed on at fullback. Definitely England's best fullback, and 15 jerseys been his for at least the last year. I think Henry Arundel is maybe the most exciting of the backs, but again, it's about it's not just being exciting; it's having that all around game as well. He will get targeted, I think, by teams with up and unders and stuff, and that can go two ways. Either he's going to catch the ball and then run back and make a fool of the opposition, or he's going to make mistakes and then people are going to ask, why he's being picked, etc. I think that's a lot problem with England, is that their media and some of the fans as well kind of get onto the players' backs a little too much, I think. But then with the others, then you got Elliot Daly, Max Malins, and Anthony Watson. So Watson gives you another kind of elusive runner on the wing, also pretty solid in the air too. And then I think Daly and Malins, they kind of give you that kind of in between, an Arundel and kind of a Freddie Stewart, where they are fairly solid. They have some They obviously have ability in attack, or they wouldn't be there. But Elliot Daly, his stocks have kind of dropped since he burst on the scene a few years ago. Max Malins has been kind of okay, I'd say, in Test rugby, but overall, still kind of, I think, another great opportunity for him to prove himself in the Rugby World Cup. So that is the squad. Let me know what you think about the players picked, who's been left out, that kind of thing. What you think England's approach is going to be for the World Cup as well. It looks like it's just going to be big guys running hard and then trying to exploit that. But I'm prepared to be pleasantly surprised by England this year.